Hitler had the supreme fascist state. And what was he worried about in Europe and in Germany? He was worried about white genetic annihilation. What is everybody in Europe worried about now? White genetic annihilation. All these people from Syria coming up in here.
And now moving to Europe, over 160,000 people protested in Germany against the center-right Christian Democrats and the far-right Alternative for Germany, or the AfD party. The rally began just outside the German parliament and moved towards the headquarters of the Christian Democrats party. The large-scale demonstrations come after the Christian Democrats voted to pass a non-binding resolution on immigration crackdown, which was backed by the AfD last week. Protesters demanded the leaders of the Christian Democrats to step down for breaking their promise of never supporting the far-right AfD party.
I came here today because I have the feeling that something is beginning to unravel, and I think it's a good thing that we stand up now and don't leave it to our parliamentarians to stand up for our democracy.
Because I find it simply impossible what the CDU, especially Mr. Merz, is up to. What also really annoys me is that they have already worked in this direction in the previous government coalition. Many people have been sent back already anyway, and migration has also decreased. I find it really outrageous that in the end they will inherit what the previous government have already begun implementing.
Now, the demonstrations come 3 weeks before the national election, where the ruling coalition led by the Socialist Democrats and Chancellor Olaf Scholz could be staring at a loss. The protests saw large crowds in major cities including Berlin, Frankfurt, Hamburg, and Dresden, where they urged the ruling coalition to roll back the recently passed immigration regulation. Currently, the center-right Christian Democrats are leading in opinion polls and are only slightly ahead of the far-right AfD party. Now, Germany's far-right party, which has been accused of being xenophobic and racist, continues to grow in popularity. Recent terror attacks carried out by migrants have left Germany divided, allowing the AfD to rise due to its harsh anti-immigrant stance. In fact, just like President Donald Trump, the AfD party's chief, Alice Weidel, has promised to carry out mass deportations of migrants on day one of taking office.
Denn wir müssen Deutschland retten.
We have to save Germany, because our fatherland has gone into a blatant imbalance. No problem drives people as much as having to watch our cities become increasingly unsafe. I was criticized for my speech in Raze, because I used the word remigration. And I'll say it again here, and now we need remigration in order to live in safety.
Liebe CDU, reißt die undemokratischen Brandmauern ein. Wir werden weiter für eine wirkliche Migrationswende.
We will continue to campaign for a real turnaround in migration with the closure of borders and the deportation of illegal foreigners. And the longer you resist passing the necessary laws together, the greater the damage will be. You are not harming the AfD, nor are you harming me. You are harming the entire country and its citizens. Every child who has to die because of this, every innocent person who is injured, raped or murdered because of this.
Unschuldigen Menschen, der deswegen noch verletzt, vergewaltigt oder ermordet wird.
Now, Germany is known for opening its doors to migrants, and the country has remained the top destination for asylum seekers in the EU for the last 2 years. But despite a welcoming policy, Germany has seen a rise in illegal border crossings by at least 33%, which has led to the anti-immigrant sentiment. With many seeing the AfD party's rise as a threat to democracy, Germany is looking at what could possibly be one of the most hotly contested elections in decades, as Germans get ready to cast their vote later this month.
I think that the white people should be ashamed of the deplorable situation that has been existing in the Congo, which is not the fault of the Congolese, but which is the result of instigation by European powers who are fighting each other over the mineral wealth of the Congo. And now to make it appear that the Congolese themselves are criminals or brutes because they're reacting to these injustices that they've been victimized by is again ducking the question.
just 2 days after the M23 rebel group, which is backed by Rwanda, said it was declaring a ceasefire in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have resumed fighting and captured a mining town in the east of the country. The UN says almost 3,000 people are thought to have been killed in recent fighting in and around Goma, DR Congo's largest eastern city, after it was seized by the rebels. We heard more from our correspondent Paul Njie, who's on the Rwandan border with the DRC.
The M23 had said that they had declared that ceasefire for humanitarian reasons, but people were shocked when there were reports that they attacked Nyabibwe in South Kivu province earlier today. And, of course, the government reacted to that, saying that they were, of course, violating their own ceasefire, and it showed that the announcement was merely a ploy. It's raising key questions about the intentions of the group. After they captured Goma, they were intending to cross over to South Kivu to capture Bukavu, which is the capital of South Kivu, just a few kilometers away from Ruzizi on the Rwandan side of the border where I'm speaking to you from. But then they said that they had no intentions to capture Bukavu or other territories. But today's fighting in Nyabibwe just showed that, of course, they might have just had other plans for the future.
So what does it appear that they want? What are they after?
Basically, they are seeking an expansionist agenda because after they conquered Goma, they believe that it's time for them to capture more territories, and their leader said that they have plans to even reach the capital, Kinshasa. They say they are fighting to protect the rights of minority groups, the minority Tutsi which they belong to. So they say that the Congolese government has not been treating the minorities well, so they are fighting to protect their rights and also improve governance in the country.
Now, meanwhile, I know it's very hard to verify all the information that's coming out. We know that there was a jailbreak in recent days in Goma, and we have heard horrific reports that women prisoners have been raped and murdered. What can you tell us?
Yeah, basically that incident came to most people as some sort of shock, because when the reports that Goma had been taken over by the rebels last week, there was a massive jailbreak, which of course led to the escape of thousands of inmates. But then there were these reports that in the midst of those who were there were women who were raped, allegedly, of course, by some male inmates there, and that's also attributable to the UN. Basically, people were not able to understand how this could have happened. At this time, verifying information is difficult also because of the fact that in terms of international recognition, there is no recognizable authority in Goma now. Even though the rebels believe that they are a legitimate institution, global organizations and countries have not recognized the M23 as the legitimate government of the areas.
That was Paul Njie on the Rwandan border with the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We lived in a fucked up part of town. That's where poor people live. I was like the manager of this building. That's the only way I could stay there for free. Had to work around the place, you know what I'm saying? The place should have been fucking condemned. I used to go to the city all the time and told them they had to get shit together. The place wasn't safe. They didn't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about people who live in the ghetto. I told my girl I was going to get around to it, you know? The place was a fire trap. So one day I come home late and I see this commotion out in the street. And I'm looking and I notice this ain't where I live, but at the same time it was my building. But I'm saying it's not my building. But it was. I ran inside. By the time I got in there, my wife and kids was dead. I kept putting off fixing that place, man. I just kept putting it off. You said that you killed them. They're dead, ain't they?
A very good morning to you. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, is facing a backlash from family and community groups over her decision to demolish the Grenfell Tower. 72 people died 8 years ago in what was the deadliest residential fire since the Second World War, triggering a national debate over safety standards. I'm joined now by Rachel Venables and by Mari Aurora to cover both sides of this story. Good morning to you both. Rachel, just break down how we kind of got to this point and I guess the significance of this announcement from Angela Rayner.
Yeah, it's a big moment. I mean, it's 7.5 years, of course, over 7.5 years since the tragedy at Grenfell. And in that time, a public inquiry has completed and reported back on 2 phases, finding in September that the disaster itself was the result of decades of failure, was the description by both government and the construction industry to act on the very real and known about dangers of flammable materials on high-rise buildings, such as we saw used, of course, in the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower to such a devastating and deadly impact. Now, as far as the police investigation are concerned, that is still ongoing, and actually they've talked about needing another year to year and a half in order to decide whether or not there will be any charges brought. But in all that time, as the community continues to grieve, the tower stays standing. Now, it's been wrapped in white sheeting with memorials on the top of it and a memorial walls, as you can see now, in the surrounding area, but that is still there, a real beacon of pain for many people in West London. And there's been a long series of debates about what should happen. Many people know the tower will have to come down at some point. It can't last forever. It's deemed to be safe for now, but it's a highly, obviously focused on piece of building there, which has been sort of really closely monitored for many years. And now we understand that Angela Rayner has spoken to some bereaved and survivors in a meeting last night, and that meeting doesn't seem to have gone down very well at all, with some in the community, where she told them that the building would be taken down. And we have had a statement through from Grenfell United, who represents some of the bereaved and the survivors, and they claim that Angela Rayner could not give a reason for her decision to demolish the tower. She refused to confirm how many bereaved and survivors had been spoken to in the recent short 4-week consultation. But judging from the room alone, they say the vast majority of whom were bereaved, no one supported her decision, but she claims it is based on our views. Today's meeting, they say, shows just how upset bereaved and survivors are about not having their views heard or considered in this decision. And they finish by saying ignoring the voices of the bereaved on the future of our loved one's gravesite is disgraceful and unforgivable. And that, I think, is the crux of this. This wasn't just their home nor a crime scene. This is where their loved ones died. And so it is a deeply charged issue, and obviously one that currently is very painful for them this morning.
Mari, talk us through the sort of political implications. And were we expecting this decision at this time from Angela Rayner?
So we weren't expecting it necessarily to come this week, but it was something that we were expecting to happen at some point. Labour talked a lot about the fact that this needed doing, but there was no indication that this would be this week. What the government is saying is that it's a very, very, as Rachel was outlining, a very, very emotive and sensitive topic. Now, they are saying that nothing is going to start, nothing is going to happen before the 8-year anniversary in June. So that will not be, interfered with in any way, shape or form. But really what they're saying is decisions need to be made. So let me read you the statement from the department. And they've said the priority for the Deputy Prime Minister is to meet with and write to the bereaved survivors and the immediate community to let them know her decision on the future of the Grenfell Tower. This is a deeply personal matter for all those affected, and the Deputy Prime Minister is committed to keeping their voice at the heart of this. So that's, to an extent, in reaction to that Grenfell United comment, kind of accusing the government of not sufficiently consulting some of the families and those survivors as well. But then on the other hand, there's been different groups that have different feelings. So Grenfell Next of Kin, they feel slightly differently, and they say they understand the hard facts around safety. And that is a part of this, this whole discussion. That building is stable for now, but it is not able to be used. It's not, able to be renovated in any way. So it does at some point need to come down. And really the discussion is what replaces it, in what form. That is a whole other story. But the government really feel that something needs to be done on this, and it's so difficult for those families and survivors. Some of them feel so strongly that they want it there. Some of them feel so strongly that they want it gone. It's so tough.
Some wonder as well on the political side whether if you knew what was coming next, maybe it would change the reaction to to the bringing down of the existing tower. Rachel, has there been any thought or discussion as to what does come next?
Yeah, so there's been a memorial group, really, that have been consulting on this for quite a few years now. I think they've narrowed it down to around 5 different organisations who could then design the final plans, and I think they're expecting that team to be selected in the summer. That was certainly the latest announcement. They've talked about themes needing a garden, a place of reflection, a place for people to come and grieve. But for some people, the tower itself is such a poignant, powerful memorial. If anyone who's driven, down the West Way in West London, you just see it, from miles around. And for many people, they want that physically very imposing structure in place because it reminds people of maybe how little has changed and the fact that they still see it as not having had any sense of justice. But, again, what happens next, that memorial, you're right, that is a key part of it, and that's going to be part of those continued conversations going forward.
Rachel, Murray for now. Thanks so much.
Why do you always treat their children? Mark my words, Mr. Resendez. If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to abuse one.
Recent reporting from The Guardian and from WWL has highlighted how the connection between the Archdiocese of New Orleans and public relations assistance provided by 2 New Orleans sports teams, the Saints and the Pelicans, runs much deeper than previously thought, a connection that involved assistance with spinning the message around the local Catholic Church's sex abuse situation. This is coming to light as the Archdiocese makes headlines for firing leadership of the Second Harvest Food Bank of Greater New Orleans in retaliation for refusing to divert as much as $16 million of the food bank's money to instead help pay for settlements of lawsuits against the church regarding sex abuse claims. To help us detail those stories, we have with us Ramon Antonio Vargas, who has been reporting on the Catholic Church in New Orleans for The Guardian. Ramon, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the Second Harvest Food Bank. What do we know so far about what the Archdiocese requested or demanded of the food bank? What's the most accurate thing to say there?
Sure. So there's conflicting interpretations, right? Former, recently dismissed leaders of the Second Harvest Food Bank described feeling pressured into providing $16 million from their funds to pay settlements for a child molestation committed by Catholic clergy in the context of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of New Orleans' long ongoing and pending bankruptcy. The Archdiocese doesn't quite characterize it that way. Instead, they discussed in theory a figure as sort of like a path for which Second Harvest could divest itself and purchase assets that would kind of allow it to separate itself from the Archdiocese, which of course owns the food bank. Much more kind of clear interpretation on one side, and sort of a more, in my opinion, in my educated guess, sort of a more muddled explanation from the other side.
So despite that nuance, what fallout are we seeing? Who all has been ousted from the food bank? What are its donors saying?
We know that the Archbishop of New Orleans, Gregory Aymon, dismissed the longtime president and CEO of the food bank, Natalie J. Rowe, along with 3 members of the board of directors, and they were replaced, obviously, by people of the Archbishop's choosing. It angered people who I think viewed the situation as basically donations that were meant to feed the hungry sort of being commandeered to, in essence, bail out the church from the bankruptcy that it needed to file in the wake of a decades-old clergy child molestation scandal. And, of course, the Archdiocese says that all donations have been used for their intended purposes, but it is one of the biggest things that people have been talking about in the city as of late.
Mm-hmm. There's one big donor, prominent attorney Morris Bart, who says he's hired an attorney of his own to look into this use of donors' money. What does that indicate to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, that another donor that hasn't spoken out about this that I'm aware, but there was a question about whether taking this money could endanger, the gift made by billionaire and novelist Mackenzie Scott, who has given very large gifts to the food bank. And I think that there's clearly that people are seeking some clarity as to whether if you give money and earmark it to feed the hungry, if that can be then taken for another purpose, right? And there seems to be competing interpretations as to whether that is something that whoever's running the food bank can do.
Why is it that the Archdiocese can take this money from the food bank? Tell me about that corporate relationship. You mentioned ownership.
It's interesting. I mean, the Archdiocese runs it. I mean, it is what is known as an apostolate, and sort of is like the term of art, which is basically an affiliate of the Archdiocese. Depending on the time, the Archdiocese has represented that these, it really can't tell what the apostolate's to do, and that they're like affiliates that are really, mainly kind of independently run. But then when it suits sort of a need, or it can help fill their need, then they will regard those apostolates as an affiliate as sort of within their control and within their power of decision. And we've seen that play out in the bankruptcy in particular.
I see. We're speaking with Ramon Antonio Vargas, editor and reporter with The Guardian, about the latest reporting on scandals involving the Archdiocese of New Orleans, allegations that the church planned to divert money from the food bank to pay off sex abuse lawsuits, and also their connections to the city's sports teams. And pivoting to that, back in 2020, it was reported that there was some level of public relations assistance provided by the saints that helped the Archdiocese do damage control around its sex abuse scandal. Just for review briefly, what did we know then?
So we knew that there were these emails that showed relatively constant level of communication between high-level executives of the New Orleans Saints and Pelicans, including owner Gail Benson, and the Archdiocese of New Orleans, run by her close personal friend, Archbishop Gregory Amen. So we knew that, and then we had competing interpretations as to what those emails showed. The Saints at the time represented that they provided minimal, basic public relations help with the church's decision to release a list of priests or deacons who had been credibly accused of child molestation, generally while serving in New Orleans. On the other hand, attorneys for clergy abuse survivors who obtained these emails through a subpoena characterized it quite differently. They said that the emails contained evidence of sort of a campaign to soften critical media coverage around the Archbishop's handling of the clergy molestation scandal, especially when it kind of reignited here locally for a number of reasons in the summer of 2018. And some of that included pressure being exerted on local media outlets to really focus on the intent of some of the actions rather than like the impact that they were having, from the Archbishop of saying that he is trying to be transparent. He is trying to sort of reconcile with people who were victimized by this scandal. And various media outlets, including The Guardian and, our reporting partners at WWL Louisiana, we got our hands on the emails, and we were able to establish that the Saints' involvement went a lot deeper than they said, and that the truth about the tone, tenor, and how long the messages went on were much closer to the interpretation offered by the clergy abuse survivors' attorneys.
Mm-hmm. Let's fast forward to the reporting today from The Guardian. What new details did you find about how deep that assistance from the Saints and the Pelicans ran?
One of the bigger things is how long it went on, right? Because the idea was that it was primarily in the lead up to the release of what has colloquially become to be known as a clergy abuser list. Sort of like the offer to help was made well in advance of the release of that list, and then they stayed in contact for several months beyond the release of the list, and really only stopped after the subpoena was issued for the communications. A lot of it dealt with trying to sort of pressure the media to provide, afford more friendly coverage of the Archbishop and his decisions and some of his actions. One thing that got a lot of attention was this email in which Saints and Pelicans Vice President of Communications, Greg Bensel, sent an email to a colleague in which he, and I'll just read it directly. It says, had a C.C.W. Leon Canizero that allowed us to take certain people off the list. And keep in mind that Leon Canizero at the time was a district attorney of New Orleans at the time. I think that they have, since then pretty strongly the DA, the Saints, the church have all denied that there was ever a conversation that Bensel had with Canizero and the church. And there was also, very strong denials that Canizero ever told anyone that the church could take names off its list. What the Saints have sort of since said is that email meant to signal that, was Bensel's interpretation of a conversation that he was aware of that had occurred between someone at the Archdiocese and Cannizzaro. And really, there is nothing in the emails that rules that as being what happened. What it does show is the level to which, the church is speaking with like the top prosecutor's office in its city, and then a Saints and Pelican spokesperson is being briefed. It does sort of like reveal the level to which he was kind of being kept abreast.
Previously, the two largest sports franchises in New Orleans denied being overly entwined with the Archdiocese. What are they saying now?
The Saints statement more recently sort of doubles down on this notion of like we were providing public relations assistance to, an organization whose cause we believe in. And there was a subtle change, and now it's no longer that they were providing that PR assistance in advance in preparation to handle media attention surrounding the release of the list so much as now it's like we were helping them sort of deal with media inquiries as it related to the clergy abuse scandal in general. It seems to have satisfied NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, who called the organization, quote, great corporate citizens, despite the revelations in the emails. But obviously, many people that I've heard from, many people who've reached out, many people just seeing reaction on the internet, obviously did catch that this is quite different than what they said they did. Not the concept of helping the archdiocese's work, but the idea of helping the archdiocese sort of message this topic in particular.
Ramon Antonio Vargas, editor and reporter with The Guardian. He's been reporting on the saga of the Archdiocese of New Orleans and its sex abuse scandal. Ramon, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Hasn't anyone told you? Secondhand smoke kills.
Yeah, but they're all dead.
And today is World Cancer Day. And every year it brings us to the leading cause of cancer worldwide, smoking cigarettes filled with cancer-causing tobacco. But the threat of cancer appears as real for non-smokers and never-smokers of the world as well. For decades, lung cancer was seen as synonymous with smoking, but now scientists have noted an alarming trend. An increasing number of lung cancer cases are being diagnosed in people who have never smoked. The reason? Air pollution. According to a report by the World Health Organization's Cancer Agency, about a fifth, or 20% of all cancer-related deaths in 2022 were among people who never smoked cigarettes or consumed tobacco in any form. The report adds that lung cancer in non-smokers occurs almost always as adenocarcinoma. It is a dominant type of cancer among people who quit smoking 5 years ago and the ones who never smoked. Now, this type of cancer starts from mucus-secreting glands in the lungs and spreads quickly in case of no diagnosis. Adenocarcinoma accounts for as much as 70% of the lung cancer cases among never smokers. Most cases were associated with regular exposure to air pollution, especially among patients in Asia. While lung cancer incidence rates for men have decreased in most countries, the rates among women have continued to rise. Scientists note that non-smoker women remain disproportionately affected by lung cancer type linked to air pollution. In 2022, adenocarcinoma accounted for over 59% of lung cancer cases among women, a 2% rise as compared to the year 2020. Now, experts suggest that non-smoking women remain excessively affected by environmental factors linked to cancer. This includes air pollution as well as household smoke exposure due to firewood or secondhand smoke due to a smoker family member. The WHO report notes that more studies are needed to identify cancer causes in populations where smoking prevalence is low. But at the same time, the scientific consensus states that while anti-smoking movements remain crucial, addressing air pollution is now equally urgent in the fight against lung cancer. That's because more evidence has emerged to cement the link between air pollution and lung cancer, particularly the ones suffered by non-smokers. Scientists say that prolonged exposure to fine particulate matter, or PM2.5, and other airborne toxins may trigger genetic mutations leading to cancer. The fine particulate matter, like PM2.5, infiltrates lungs and causes chronic inflammation. This polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or the PAHs, found in vehicular emissions are known cancer-causing pollutants. Indoor air pollution from cooking fuels and secondhand smoke remains a growing concern in many developing regions in the world. Lung cancer is no longer just about smoking. It's also about the air we breathe. Scientists are calling for urgent action to reduce pollution and to improve early detection. The question is not just, do you smoke, but is the air around you safe to breathe?
Stop using and selling drugs to one another. See, we're getting ready to be put in a real trap with this legalization of marijuana. So everybody, every black person can be unemployed, and then they can sit in their corner and get high on marijuana with whatever they decide to put in it. And people won't be asking for jobs and being determined that they're going to get jobs and going to get an education. No, everybody can start getting high on marijuana because somebody said it's medicinal and it's legal.
What about,
so we better beware.
What about the people who say the legalization of marijuana is fighting against racism because you have so many black people who are unjustly incarcerated as a result of racist enforcement of these drug laws? So this would be a good thing, and it would keep black people out of greater confinement.
No, we can do it by stop using and selling drugs to one another. See, if I'm not using drugs, then I can't be incarcerated for drugs. And I see so many males, young males in my practice who have become psychotic, almost never to return to normal from marijuana use because you don't know what's in it.
Marijuana sales are increasing as it becomes legally available in more places across the country, and that includes vaped weed. Now, that's a liquid version that's vaporized and inhaled. And if you use it, you might have wondered what's actually in it, and how does the safety of these products compare to conventional smoked marijuana? As part of our series, How Safe Is Your Weed?, NPR's Yuki Noguchi has looked into this.
Vaping pot from an e-cigarette can be relatively odorless and discreet compared to smoking dried marijuana flower. And Aaron Smith, CEO of the National Cannabis Industry Association, says that's why vaping is increasingly the preferred method of consumption.
We're definitely seeing an increase in sales for vapes and a decrease in flower.
Smith, as well as some researchers, posit that vaping pot, much like nicotine, is potentially easier on the lungs than smoking because the vaporized liquid inside is heated to lower temperatures that may do less harm. On the other hand, much is still unknown. Research on the health effects of pot is sparse because it remains federally illegal. Plus, no two vapes are alike. The huge variety of products on shelves today contain many other chemicals that make each different. And often it's those other chemicals that prove problematic. In 2019, for example, 68 people died and thousands of others fell ill with mysterious lung damage, eventually traced to e-cigarettes laced with pot and an additive called vitamin E acetate. Smith says that's where legalization and regulation are helpful.
And that's why there are regulations in every state that has legal cannabis to ensure that these products are tested, dangerous chemicals are not used in the process.
But Josh Sweeter says his own safety testing of vapes shows many chemicals are evading those regulations. He's CEO of Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, a company that chemically evaluates marijuana products in all their forms. He says states that allow marijuana to be sold also screen for up to 66 pesticides. Yet there are thousands of other pesticides that growers or processors use, and he's found many of those in the country's pot supply.
When you concentrate your flower cannabis into a concentrate, most pesticides come over and concentrate during that same procedure.
Sweeter says dangers are not limited to the drugs extracted from the marijuana plant. He says in many markets, THC, the psychoactive ingredient in pot, is made synthetically through a chemical process that leaves behind residue. He says about a quarter of those contain a corrosive, toxic chemical similar to sulfuric acid.
Cannabis and this synthetic stuff, it's like an endless supply of possible contaminants.
Deepak Cyrils D'Souza is a psychiatry professor at Yale who's researched THC for 3 decades. He has other concerns about vaping, too, namely their potency.
The amount of THC that's present in these concentrates is far in excess of what average weed contains.
He says today the average cannabis flower contains about 17 or 18% THC, where the concentration in vape pens is often 5 times higher. And that, D'Souza says, has other implications for public health, especially among teenagers and young adults.
The young brain is much more vulnerable to addiction. Concentrates are more likely to get people addicted to it.
And as pot goes more mainstream, he says, that's a message that's often drowned out. Yuki Noguchi, NPR News.
A terrible thing to waste. Environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. Written by Harriet A. Washington.
We end today's show with President Trump's moves to shut down the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. On Thursday, 168 workers of the Environmental Justice Office were placed on leave. The office was first established in 1992 after research showed communities with hazardous waste sites had a higher percentage of black and low-income residents. For more, we're joined in Washington, D.C. by Mustafa Santiago Ali, the former head of the EPA's Environmental Justice Program. He resigned in 2017 to protest a Trump administration proposal to severely scale back the agency. So you resigned under Trump administration 1. Now it's not scaling back, it's shutting it down. Can you talk first about what environmental justice is and what it will mean?
Yeah. Well, environmental justice deals with the disproportionate impacts that happen in communities of color and lower wealth communities. Those communities are everywhere from Appalachia to Flint, Michigan, to the Navajo Nation. It makes sure that folks have a voice, makes sure that they have an opportunity to play a role in the impacts that are happening in their communities. It also helps them to be able to play a role in moving from surviving to thriving.
And so you have 168, some people are saying 200 workers within the Environmental Justice Program put on leave. So what happens to communities across the country?
Well, they're now placed in a much dangerous situation because they no longer have that advocate for them inside of the Environmental Protection Agency. You know, we have over 100 million people in our country right now who are dealing with unsafe air, whether it's from ozone, particulate matter, or a number of other things. And many times our most vulnerable communities are the ones who are carrying those burdens. So they no longer have someone to make sure that they have the information that they need. And that they have the ability to work with the agency and others to address that. We know that we've got all these dangerous chemicals that are in our waters right now, everything from lead. And we saw what happened in Flint, Michigan, and Benton Harbor, and a number of other locations across our country. But we also have things like TCE and forever chemicals, and a number of other things that are just very deadly. So they no longer have someone, a place to be able to go to understand how to navigate these very dangerous situations that they're often facing. They also no longer will have the resources that are necessary to help their groups to be able to properly advocate, to help to make change happen inside of their communities.
The Guardian has an article headlined, Trump's proposed EPA leadership stacked with lobbyists and attorneys. What concerns you most about the EPA right now? And what message do you have right now? Hundreds of EPA career workers have left. ProPublica reports those who remain feel deeply torn. You quit under the first Trump administration. What message do you have for those who are remaining?
Well, first, I'm very concerned about the deregulation and the focus on corporate profits, because anytime that we place profit over people, then we are putting a crosshair on our most vulnerable, our most marginalized. For all those brothers and sisters who are still there at the agency and for those who have been put on leave, I would give them the words of my grandmother, that you have power unless you give it away. And that means that not only them, but citizens across our country who believe that everyone has the right to have clean air and clean water for their children to be able to be on land that is free from toxic pollution, then we have to raise our voices. We have to get engaged. We have to make sure that folks understand that this is not an American value, and that we also have to understand that there is power inside of our vote. I never tell anyone who to vote for, but I do say you should be thinking very clearly about voting for somebody who cares about your communities. So don't give up your power. Continue to build relationships together and stand in solidarity.
Last week, the Senate confirmed former Long Island Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin as head of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. 3 Democrats joined with the Republicans in the vote. Arizona Senators Ruben Gallego and Mark Kelly, Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. Youth Climate Action Group Sunrise Movement condemns Zeldin's confirmation as a disaster for the planet and a win for fossil fuel executives, writing, quote, he took $420,000 from big oil, pledged to undo climate protections, and has been all in with Trump, backing corporate polluters at the expense of working people. In this last minute that we have together, Mustafa, where do you see this country going right now? You just stood with other climate activists outside protesting. What is your ultimate demand?
Well, our ultimate demand is to stop placing these crosshairs on vulnerable communities and communities across our country. We should be focused on making sure that folks' health is being improved and not, having a situation where folks are going to be sicker. Their actions also will make us poorer because we know that the focus for the 21st century has to be on a cleaner economy. So once again, we have the opportunity to move people from surviving to thriving, but the current sets of actions that they're moving forward on are going to do absolutely the opposite.
Mustafa Santiago Ali, we thank you so much for being with us, former head of the Environmental Justice Program at the Environmental Protection Agency. It is now in the Trump administration's crosshairs. 168 workers at least have been put on leave. He is now the executive vice president of the National Wildlife Federation.
I'm getting in the elevator, and these 2 high school white boys tried to get on with me. And I just dove off. I said, y'all ain't killing me. I am scared of young white boys. If you white and under 21, I'm running for the hill. What the hell is wrong with these white kids shooting up the school?
Now let's talk about Sweden. The Nordic country has witnessed its deadliest gun attack in history. It happened in the city of Örebro, which is west of the capital Stockholm. A gunman entered an adult education center and opened fire. At least 11 people have died, including the shooter, and several others are injured. So who was the perpetrator? What was the motive behind the attack? And how are people reacting to this tragedy that has sent shockwaves through Sweden? Here is a report.
Sweden is in shock. Authorities are still searching for answers after a deadly shooting attack unfolded on Tuesday. At least 11 people were killed and at least 6 were wounded in what the government has called the worst mass shooting in the country's history.
It is difficult to take in the magnitude of what has happened today, the darkness that is now falling over Sweden tonight. Today we have seen a brutal, deadly violence against completely innocent people. This is the worst mass shooting in Swedish history.
It happened at an adult education center in the city of Örebro, home to about 100,000 people, 200 kilometers west of the capital, Stockholm. Gunfire erupted around noon local time. The school offers classes to about 2,000 adults, many of whom are immigrants seeking qualifications to help them find jobs in the Nordic country. Some students were in class, while others were having lunch when the gunman began firing. Students cowered under their desks. Authorities soon responded. Police cars arrived. Armed officers swarmed the campus. Nearby schools were put on lockdown. When the officers reached, the suspected gunman was already dead. after having claimed 10 other victims.
When the police arrived, there was gunfire. The perception was also that they got fired upon initially. When the search was then carried out inside the premises, the perpetrator was found dead.
The police are still in the process of identifying the victims, and they have opened an investigation. They are looking into murder, arson, and an aggravated weapons offense, but they claim this was a one-man operation. So who was the perpetrator? The details are not clear yet. But according to reports, it was a 35-year-old unemployed recluse. The police say there were no prior warning signs. The perpetrator was not previously known to the police. And there is strong evidence that the gunman shot himself. Though it's not clear what the suspect's exact motives were behind the attack. Swedish media reports are rife with rumors about ideological motives to attack a school educating immigrants, but the police have dismissed such talk.
Another bit that is important and that everyone can take responsibility for is to only spread confirmed information. Rumors and speculation are something that only creates more anxiety in an already anxious time.
It's an anxious time for Sweden indeed. The country has high living standards. It was long known for low crime rates, but now it has one of the highest per capita rates of gun violence in the European Union. Even so, mass gun attacks or school attacks are rare in the country. And today, as people woke up to sheer shock and pain, the country is grieving victims of its deadliest gun attack. Candles and flowers have been placed near the school where the incident took place. Flags are flying at half-mast in Örebro, as well as the Parliament and the Royal Palace in Stockholm. The Prime Minister met with the Justice Minister and the police authority. The Swedish King and Queen have visited the school and attended a memorial service. The attack has sent shockwaves through Sweden, and the country is coming together in mourning, hoping that this tragedy doesn't repeat itself.
Because white supremacy is the biggest business on earth, most effective. It's the strongest religion on earth. No religion matches it. You try to practice your religion, whatever it is, and the white supremacists say, hey, that part you can't practice, not here. And I haven't seen it fail. You take it out. You ignore that part. You don't defy them, regardless of the name of your religion, because the religion of white supremacy is the supreme religion on this planet, among the people of this planet. So far. That doesn't say that other religions are not gaining, but right now they are not being practiced, not to the letter, if it dissatisfies the white supremacists.
A progressive pastor at a North Carolina church spent years promoting racial justice, and he has repeatedly called out President Donald Trump. Within weeks of the November election, the pastor was out. Publicly, church leaders say his removal had nothing to do with politics or his preaching, but some congregants feel betrayed, and they say the conflict inside their church reflects a broader one within the American left. NPR's Frank Langfitt reports from Charlotte.
Pastor Don Boswell says he was determined for Myers Park Baptist Church to confront its whiteness, as he explained during an online anti-racism seminar he hosted several years ago.
We have a wedding policy that has been described by our current chair of deacons as WASPy. Our space as a church, very colonialist in style, and it needs some decolonization. We're going to be in a constant process of doing what I call a whiteness audit.
Boswell says he ran into resistance from congregants who, for instance, told him to take down Black Lives Matter signs. Boswell persisted.
I like to joke, churches have sacred cows. Sacred cows make the best hamburgers.
Myers Park is a white liberal church in a neighborhood where mansions can sell for more than $4 million. After the November election, Boswell gave a sermon in which he likened this moment to what he called, quote, the gathering dark of Hitler's rule. He referenced Christ's resurrection and urged congregants to maintain hope.
Where do we go from here? We go back to the beginning. We do what our ancestors have done. We get up and we walk toward the tomb because the fight's not over, it's just beginning. Amen.
Provocative sermons were nothing new for Boswell, who'd been at the church for 9 years. But a few weeks later, the church's Board of Deacons, its governing body, met on Zoom. They voted 17-3 to ask Boswell to step down. NPR obtained the audio. It provides a rare window into the thinking of an organization when the tone of its social or political messaging clashes with its business model. Marcy McClanahan was head of the board. In the meeting, the first reason she cited for Boswell to leave was plunging attendance.
We have gone from approximately 350 members attending on average each week at service in 2016 when Ben arrived, to approximately 150 members attending on average each week in 2024.
Fellow Deacon Robert Doolin was more direct.
We got to put more butts in the seats.
In an email to NPR, Doolin said he personally loved what he calls Boswell's powerful prophetic preaching. The problem, he says, is that it had worn thin with others. Here's how Doolin put it in the meeting.
A lot of these people who left the church a few years ago, in the last few years, if any of you talked to them, you heard the same thing over and over again. I'm tired of being indicted because I'm white. I'm tired of being banged over the head every week about immigrants and LGBTQ, and I just want to come to church and be encouraged.
As people left, their contributions left with them. Since 2020, the church's budget has shrunk by nearly a quarter.
Ben needs to leave in order for our church to take a different direction and grow, because we are dying on the vine.
Good morning. We are glad that you're here with us.
Myers Park Baptist is a cavernous red brick church with a big white steeple, and it wears its progressive politics really right on the front of the church. You've got a giant sign here that says 80 years of inclusivity, community, spirituality, and justice, and on the other side, open to all, now and forevermore. In the meeting, Deacon Alan Davis warned that getting rid of Boswell would undermine that very message.
It will be very difficult for us to continue to tell the narrative that we are this inclusive, open to all, one welcoming, growing community, when what will come out is that we've snatched the keys from the 10-year minister who had been pushing us to confront whiteness, to challenge racial justice in our community.
Davis was among 3 deacons who resigned in protest. In an interview, McClanahan, the then board chair, called Boswell, quote, a fantastic and visionary preacher, and she insisted the church would continue to advance racial and social justice. But some of Boswell's supporters say the conflict at Myers Park is part of a much larger one.
This is just a continuation of the issues we saw throughout the disagreements in the Democratic Party writ large.
Nicholas Ryan has attended Myers Park since preschool. He's now 30.
There's a group of us who are younger and more passionate and maybe a tad more progressive who are fed up with just being told to wait, don't worry.
After services in December, the church leadership met with the congregation behind closed doors to discuss Boswell's departure. Afterwards, many parishioners were eager to talk.
My name is Bruce Griffin. I'm a warehouse worker in Charlotte.
Griffin wore a San Francisco 49ers jacket. He said Boswell created a wonderful open community here. Now, he's bitter.
I feel the church betrayed me. I feel the congregation betrayed me. Just today at this meeting, some of the same people that I feel betrayed me came in, and it was straight to business. And there was no hugging. There was no fellowship.
I mentioned that some white congregants felt beaten down by Boswell's continued emphasis on social and racial justice.
As a black man, I would respond to that I feel beaten down every day.
Are you going to stay here at the church?
I will not.
While Griffin was talking about leaving Myers Park, Elizabeth Peterson was returning for the first time in years.
Reverend Boswell has divided the church rather than unifying the church.
Peterson says that for a long time, Myers Park seemed more focused on people of color and LGBTQ folks.
I wished that he could have brought his energy for diversity and for change of the culture of the church and included us to come with him.
And when you say us, who's us?
People of my age. I'm over 65, definitely not wealthy.
But do you think you'll come back to the church now?
I think I might, yes. I think I will.
Pastor Ben Boswell has heard these sorts of things before.
When you've been
the dominant culture for so long, the focus and attention on anyone who's been marginalized feels like a slight against you.
He says the conflict at Myers Park is part of a much bigger national trend to roll back things like diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
We just happen to be in a moment now in American history where that work is coming with a cost, and people are getting tired and backing away from it.
But church leaders say their concerns extended to Boswell's management. Others say he focused too much on social justice and not enough on tending the flock, one of the church's strategic goals. Bob Thomason is a former chairman of the Board of Deacons. He said he was speaking as a longtime church member.
Most of us, all of us, are very supportive of social justice, but for some people, being able to focus on social justice, it would be a welcome luxury because they have alcoholic spouses, they have children that are addicted, they have cancer, they have these personal needs, and that gets to the other part of the strategic plan, which was caring for the internal community.
Pastoral part of the
pastoral
job.
Part. Not so great there. We were basically taking care of ourselves as best we could.
Boswell says he was committed to pastoral care and devoted a staffer to it full time. Boswell knows that some people think he made a mistake by focusing so much on racial and social justice. But he says he'd do it again and will continue to preach that message, whatever he does next. Frank Langford, NPR News, Charlotte.
The Turner Diaries. It sold over 500,000 copies. Who do you think is buying it? Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber. Wade Page, who shut up the Sikh temple. Larry Ford, developing typhoid and cholera. William Carr with the cyanide bomb. Anthrax, ricin, botulism, C4, IEDs. I could go on like this for hours, and all of them are white supremacists.
It sounds improbable, but after a court ruling this week, the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Washington owns the Proud Boys trademark. Yes, just to be clear, you did hear that correctly. The far-right extremist group can no longer sell hats, jackets, or anything else emblazoned with their name or logo without the church's permission. And the church can also move to seize the profits from anything they do sell under that trademark. Reverend Bill Lamar IV leads the Metropolitan AME Church, and he joins us now in studio. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Juana.
Reverend, I'd like to just start, if I could, by asking you a little bit about how we got here. Now, for people who may not remember, back in 2020, Proud Boys members jumped a fence onto your church's property. They destroyed a Black Lives Matter banner, and a judge ordered them in 2023 to pay the church $2.8 million. They failed to do so, and so the court granted your church this trademark instead. Just start by telling us if you know where that idea came from.
So actually, Juana, it is confusing. There were actually two lawsuits. The first suit is the suit that ended with Judge Kravitz of the D.C. Superior Court granting us nearly $3 million in damages, and that is growing because interest is applied to the decision. And because they defied the order of Judge Kravitz, we appeared again with a second lawsuit. We determined that the value they had was in their trademark, which they used the license to sell merchandise to recruit for their white supremacist and fascist activities, and we went after that trademark to be made whole. They defied the court, and we defy them in that we will live joyfully, we will do what we have always done without fear, even in the face of what they did to us.
There is a statement on the homepage of your church's website that I read earlier today, and part of it reads, "For the first time in our nation's history, a black institution owns property of a white supremacist group." And that statement, as I read it, it just carries a whole lot of weight. What does it mean to you?
Well, first of all, it means that my wife is a good writer. And the second thing it means is, I think in this moment, so many people feel defeated, not only here, but geopolitically. People who believe that humans should be free and flourish and share space together. And our victory magnifies the fact that we need not shrink in this moment politically. I think that what it means is we will not always get what we want. We will not always win, but where there are victories, other victories are seated. And there was a passage of scripture where Joseph is mistreated by his brothers, and ultimately, many people misinterpret this, and I hate the way many people interpret it, but the language is, what was meant for evil, the divine repurposes for good. So I want to communicate that evil is afoot, but good is not defeated, nor is good dead, if we will continue to lift our eyes toward what's possible together.
So your church now owns the Proud Boys trademark. I do have to ask you, is there anything about this outcome that feels scary? I'll just note that members of the Proud Boys have been convicted of numerous crimes in recent years, violent crimes in some cases, in addition to vandalizing your church.
Well, I think it's clear that this is a decision that the church took, and we're clear that it was not without risk. We're clear that they are violent. We're clear that they exist to stoke violence. And we understood that Fannie Lou Hamer was taking risks in Sunflower County, Mississippi. We understand that Ida B. Wells Barnett was taking risks when she was writing about the truth of lynching. We understand that our ancestors come from a long line of those who took risks for themselves and for human flourishing, and we cannot shrink in this moment. I keep remembering the poetry of Lucille Clifton, who says, "Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and it has failed." This has failed, and it will fail.
I'll note that President Trump has pardoned, in some cases commuted in others, sentences for members of the group, the Proud Boys, for their involvement in the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol just down the road here. Does that give you any pause, any concern? I understand wanting to be bold in the face, all the inspiration you just talked about, but do you worry, even a bit?
Oh, well, you have to. I mean, I think that to consider what is possible is to be realistic, but there is something in us that causes us to rise above. The kitchen table moment of Martin Luther King comes back when he is disturbed and being threatened and gets a nasty call from vitriolic racists. And he hears the voice of God saying to fight on. He hears the voice of God telling him that he was called for this purpose, and we have been called for this purpose. And it's really sad. The pardon is of a piece with the lost cause mythology. America has a way of punishing the poor, the black, the gay, the dispossessed, but letting these type of extremists, these type of violent insurrectionists, the same way that they found a way to deify the lost cause of Confederate mythology, they're trying to do that now. But we will keep speaking truth, and the light will continue to shine.
The former leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, was part of the group that vandalized your church, and on social media, he reacted to this judgment. He claims that he was denied due process, but he also called for your organization, for your church to be audited, to lose its nonprofit status. And it's really easy to talk about things that we see and hear on social media as just confined to that space. But in the current climate, given everything we've seen, given everything that people are experiencing right now, are you concerned that this decision could bring your ministry unwanted attention?
It is possible. And we are clear that the law is on our side. What we are doing is not outside of the law. What they did was outside of the law. And this type of gaslighting from criminals is problematic. We have to talk about it because they're trying to distract us from the work that we are to do. And much of what I'm hearing from that side, in the words of my father's late sister, who's an English teacher, Juanita Dolores Lamar, that certain kinds of ignorance deserve no response.
Do you have any sense of what your church plans to do with the money?
When we get it, we seek to repurpose it not only to further our mission, we also want to use money, should we get it, to lift up other organizations. This would be a reverse capitalism kind of way of doing this. We're not just going to accumulate, but we're going to share with others who are doing this work around the nation, and we've been in touch with some of them. So we don't want this victory to be a moment or a one-off. We want to seed an energy and inspiration that will help us to move forward in days to come, because days to come will become more difficult.
Your church is a familiar sight for so many of us who live in and around Washington. It is historic, but for many people who are perhaps hearing our conversation, this story is the first time they will have ever heard of your church. I wonder, what should they know about it? What would you like people to know and understand about your ministry?
It's a wonderful question. Our ministry is a part of the Black prophetic tradition, and the Black prophetic tradition believes that we are all siblings, and wherever there is exploitation, oppression, and extraction, our tradition has spoken into that and sought to build a space where we can live together. We have never excluded anyone. You got the National Cathedral down the street, but at a point, my grandparents were not welcome there. So we do not exclude, we love all, and we seek to build the kind of world where we can live and flourish together.
That was Reverend Bill Lamar. He's the pastor for the Metropolitan AME Church here in Washington, D.C. Reverend, thank you for coming by our studios.
Thank you. I'm a fan. I'm excited.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I turned the ISO up on my camera, and I have this dark photo of this flag waving, and smoke tear gas is coming down, and there's hardly any more people up the top. It just is weirdly over. You know, I walked 2 blocks, called an Uber. I just remember looking at who my driver was going to be, and I was so relieved that this driver was a black man. Because I really honestly couldn't deal with any more white folks that day. I couldn't. I was just over it.
Since President Trump gave blanket clemency to all January 6th defendants, even those who violently assaulted police, there has been an explosion of online threats against prosecutors and FBI agents who investigated the Capitol riot. And people who worked on January 6th cases told NPR's Tom Dreisbach that they don't think the Trump administration will protect them.
The threats are everywhere and often graphic. The prosecutors who worked on January 6 cases, quote, deserve a rope, reads one post. One pardoned rioter said his prosecutors need to fry. Then there's Enrique Tarrio, the former leader of the far-right Proud Boys. After Trump pardoned him for committing seditious conspiracy, freeing him from a 22-year prison sentence, Tarrio went on InfoWars and said this.
The people who did this, they need to feel the heat. They need to be put behind bars, and they need to be prosecuted.
These kinds of threats have a lot of people who worked on January 6th cases really worried for their own safety. I talked to one prosecutor who asked not to be named because he's concerned about retaliation. I spent my career prosecuting violent criminals, including murderers, he told me. Never have I felt less safe than with these defendants. Natalie Berra, the leader of the nonprofit FBI Agents Association, talked about these threats at a press conference this week.
Social media posts are circulating calling for violence against FBI personnel. This rhetoric is not just irresponsible, it is dangerous.
Agents say their personal information has already been uploaded online, and cops who defended the Capitol on January 6th are also getting threats. Rioters beat police officer Michael Fanone and attacked him with a stun gun at the base of his skull on January 6th. Trump's pardon freed the people who assaulted Fanone. So he told MSNBC he's trying to get a protective order to keep them away.
Donald Trump chose to pardon these violent criminals. They are all out on the street today. Because of Donald Trump's actions, my family is less safe.
During the Biden administration, FBI Director Christopher Wray pushed back on threats against federal law enforcement, called it deplorable and dangerous. The Trump Justice Department did not respond to our request for comment. The new top federal prosecutor in D.C. is a conservative activist named Ed Martin. He actually marched to the Capitol on January 6th, but did not break in or commit any crimes. Afterwards, he advocated for January 6th defendants. And in a podcast interview last year, Martin suggested that the January 6th attack was, quote, staged, and that the people who assaulted police might have been justified.
I'm not saying if you hit a cop, you can get excused. I'm not saying that. Although I am saying the more we find out about how staged and managed this was, the more we have to have less judgment on somebody who hits a cop.
At another point in that interview, Martin said maybe the violence against police wasn't such a big deal.
I don't defend anybody. I tell you, I don't defend anybody hitting a cop. But I've seen people hit a cop, and that doesn't make it the end of the world.
Now that Ed Martin is in the Trump administration, he's overseen the firing of more than 24 people who worked on January 6 prosecutions. People in the Justice Department expect a lot more firings. Officials there told me all this makes them think no one in the government will take these violent threats against them seriously. One official who worked on these prosecutions asked for anonymity because they're already getting online threats. They told me they're not reporting these threats to their supervisors at the Justice Department, quote, because we don't think they'll care, unless and until one of us gets killed. Tom Dreisbach, NPR News.
Let me say something that gets to the very crux of the matter, and this may be offensive for some to hear who are not on the side that we're on. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Say that again.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
And now we shift focus to President Trump's closest ally, Elon Musk. The billionaire has been making headlines over the actions of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which he now leads. Now, from being accused of overreach into federal departments to demanding fatigue-inducing work hours from DOGE employees, Elon Musk has not having a good week. In fact, now Musk and DOGE are caught in another controversy. A senior DOGE employee was asked to leave the team after facing backlash over his previous posts on social media that were racist. Marco Elise, the former DOGE staffer, urged his followers on social media to quote-unquote normalize hate against Indians. According to an NPR report, Elise frequently boasted about his anti-Indian and anti-immigration stance, and he once tweeted, quote, "I was racist before it was cool," end quote. Now, Elise is a 25-year-old software engineer who was working for DOGE and was given access to the Treasury Department, where he had access to sensitive banking data of millions of Americans. The NPR report further suggests that Elise enjoys close relations with Elon Musk, and the two have previously worked together at SpaceX. A White House official has now confirmed Elise's resignation from DOGE. However, Americans and Democrats are now demanding answers.
Elon Musk has absolutely no business handling the personal information of American taxpayers, period. For an unelected billionaire to have full access to Americans' personal tax and Social Security information is not only an egregious violation of privacy, but it is illegal under Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code. Our phones have been ringing off the hook with constituents who are horrified and frightened that their personal information has been handed over to an unelected billionaire with no accountability to the American people.
Now, Elon Musk and employees at DOGE are neither elected nor a part of a federal agency. However, they do have access to sensitive data of the Pentagon, the Department of Justice, the IRS, the FBI, and even the CIA.
House Republicans don't appear interested in working for everyday Americans and solving problems for hardworking American taxpayers. Why? Because they are working for Elon Musk and doing the bidding of an unelected, unaccountable, out of control billionaire puppet master.
And today we're here to say with one voice, fire Elon Musk. An unelected, unaccountable billionaire now has seemingly unlimited powers over Americans' private data and over Americans' taxpayer dollars. It seems every hour brings more news about a new threat Elon Musk poses to working people, a new way that Elon Musk wants to take your hard-earned money and keep it for himself.
And now additional reports have emerged that Elon Musk has even hired teenagers to be part of DOGE, with the youngest member being a high school graduate who's just 19 years old. Now, prior to President Trump's inauguration, many expressed optimism that Elon Musk's DOGE could bring about a new work culture in Washington. But with the latest developments, enthusiasm has dropped dramatically as Musk battles controversies and uncomfortable questions.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
We have new information about an officer-involved shooting in northern Maine.
Local residents of Portage, a town with a population of around 400, say they were traumatized by that incident that left one man dead. Jim Keithley reports tonight.
An armed standoff suspect who would end up dead posted this dramatic video to social media.
I'm here. My name is Stephen Regini. I am a resident of Maine, and I had the cops called on me. A SWAT team showed up, and I am now engaged in a shootout.
It was, I'm going to end up starting to cry. It was just pretty upsetting.
From Coffin's General Store in downtown Portage Lake, Tracy Wadsworth, a clerk, can see the apartment building at 20 Ranger Street, where a Maine State Police tactical team converged Monday. Police said it was in response to a domestic dispute, which led to an armed standoff involving 29-year-old Stephen Regini. Regini's 18-year-old wife told police her husband pushed her into a wall. The couple's 4-week-old baby was in the house with Regini during the standoff, which lasted several hours. Police say Regini shot Deputy Shane Campbell in the shoulder. Police K-9 Preacher was deployed to try to take the suspect into custody. But police say Regini shot the police dog in the chest. The dog later died. 2 officers returned fire, and Regini was killed. Tracy Wadsworth said she spoke with Regini's wife today.
She said, that's not him. She said, he was having some sort of mental breakdown. She talked to him throughout the day and had tried to get him to surrender, turn himself in, and he said he couldn't do it.
The wounded officer was treated and released from a hospital in Presque Isle. Police said the infant daughter was not hurt and returned to her mother. The Attorney General's office is investigating and will determine if the shooting was justified. I'm Jim Keithley for Maine's Total Coverage.
Yeah. You're still saying there's no profiling, but it is. It is. We're being hunted every day. It's a silent war against African American people as a whole.
The hunt is on. And you're the prey.
Now a story we shouldn't be telling you only because it shouldn't have happened. A woman in Springfield, Illinois called 911 for help, and a responding deputy killed her. Since the death of Sonia Massey last summer, CBS News has been investigating the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. What we found is a troubling record of alleged misconduct. Jerika Duncan has tonight's Eye on America.
I'm trying for your help, y'all.
Last July, Sonia Massey called 911, concerned about a possible prowler outside her Illinois home. Less than 5 minutes after entering, Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson shot Massey dead in her kitchen. Grayson later said he felt threatened. He's been charged with murder and pleaded not guilty. The sheriff at the time characterized the shooting as an isolated incident.
This was a rogue individual that acted outside the scope of his authority.
But a CBS News investigation revealed there was nothing isolated about the shooting of Sonia Massey. We found a pattern in Sangamon County, dozens of allegations of misconduct against the sheriff's office over the past 20 years, including 8 deaths in addition to Massey's.
This is our son that we lost that we'll never have.
In 2021, Cindy Cody's stepson, Jamison Cody, was arrested for aggravated domestic battery. That night in jail, correction officers wanted to move him to a different room. He resisted. Shay Kelly is the family's attorney.
They took him down to the ground, and a man of over 300 pounds sat on his back, broke ribs.
Cody was pronounced dead the next day.
He died from positional asphyxia, homicide. It was a homicide.
We brought together families who say they've been victimized by the sheriff's office and have sued.
This just goes on and on. Somebody has to stop it.
None of the officers involved has been criminally charged, and in each case, the sheriff's office and the officers denied any wrongdoing, even in the cases the county settled.
I can't move on until there's some kind of justice.
Starla Smith's 23-year-old son, Dylan Schleeper Clark, died from what she says was a treatable staph infection after her son was booked at a county jail for drug possession in 2022.
The doctors told you he could have survived had he been treated sooner.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think deputies saw when they looked at your child?
I don't think they looked at him. I think that they looked past him.
We showed 50 abuse complaints to Sangamon County's new sheriff, Paula Crouch, appointed in the wake of Massey's death.
Does this office have a policing problem?
I don't think that the sheriff's office has a policing problem. Do you run into bad employees? Probably every agency has had those people.
What I'm hearing is there's no limit to how many complaints someone could have and very well still be working as a deputy.
There's no written limit that says after 5 complaints you're fired.
Sonia Massey's cousin, Sante, says he's still traumatized by what happened.
I would say to the new sheriff, be a rebel. There's nowhere to go from here but up.
Advice for the future, grounded in a painful past. For Eye on America, I'm Jerika Duncan in Springfield, Illinois.
The Sangamon County Sheriff's Office agreed last month to be monitored by the Justice Department for 2 years. But the future of that agreement is uncertain. Civil rights agreements reached at the end of the Biden administration are now under review by the Trump DOJ.
Said it was under review by the Trump DOJ. I didn't know is that a punchline? Is that a joke? Like, you already know what that means. no DEI and all that. You can go on and tell Sonia Massey folks you can go on and brace for it, because you don't get your hopes up. Saturday night, I'm black and I'm dangerous. That phrase sounds worse and worse every time I hear it. Black History Month. Gus T. Renegade, the worthless Negro from Virginia, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with victims of white supremacy, non-white people, about the global system of white supremacy racism, what it is and how it works. Today's date, Saturday, February 8, 2025. So I have been told. Our weekly compensatory call-in, not for greatest spectators. Hopefully more accurate than not, for non-white people to share thoughts, views, suggestions, counter-racist information. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Lots to share. We will get to number one. We will be here tomorrow on our counter-racist grind for Black History Month. Normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That means we'll be broadcasting live during the Super Bowl. This has so much of a feeling of deja vu for me. The last time Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, played in the Super Bowl, we were broadcasting live with a white woman, suspected racist, talking about brain damage, racism, and tackle football. So nice, we do it twice. Same thing for tomorrow. Now, it's not the same white woman. We had admitted racist Jessica Wallace last time around. Different white woman, but same subject matter: brain damage, racism, and tackle football, live with the Super Bowl. We'll have to ask our white woman tomorrow. Now, are you sneaking off to watch the game or cursing us under your breath because we are taking your time away from the game and all that? We shall see. But that is tomorrow, and we might even be here Monday as well talking about the California wildfires and racism. We'll confirm tomorrow as we proceed. Have been on every day since Wednesday. I said we had to do our appreciation for Mr. Fuller on Wednesday because we do not have free spots to do this anytime as we continue on our counter-racist grind, and we can have our gratitude for Mr. Fuller as we proceed. Heard from him even today, which is kind of what we would normally do anyway, but everything in stride. Anywho, so we will be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Love it. Brain damage time. Now, get in one tidbit on Mr. Fuller, and then we'll get to some of the audio clips that we heard as well, and folks who dialed in, all that good stuff. Now, news reports, I'd said this before about Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, that Dr. Welsing, Mr. Fuller, they spent so much time publicly addressing the global system of white supremacy racism that they have newspaper articles and programs and TV shows that they were on for decades. I mean, going back all the way to the 70s for both of them. It's just a matter of, if you can find the material and, wherever somebody got it in a shoebox, a tape recording, a video recording, or whatever it is. But all of them have so much material. It's just tons to always go back and research and see what they had to say and predictions that they made and how long some of the theories and ideas that they came up with, how long, they have been suggesting that we try some of the things that they have talked about, like not name calling black people. Way back in 1991, I started going to check to see which articles I had missed, or just checking for articles with Mr. Fuller from way back. Way back in 1991, the LA Sentinel, now this was odd because I've been looking at a lot of LA Sentinel reports for the last 3-4 months. Jonestown, Dr. Welsing even popped up in there today too. And then current, like right now, 2025 LA Sentinel, LA wildfires. They had Magic Johnson in there helping out last week too. Anyway, the LA Sentinel, black newspaper, June 27, 1991. Racism, literature scrutinized at Compton Community College campus. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'll give you the pertinent parts. Racism is a local and global power system structured by persons who classify themselves as white for the ultimate purpose of survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Racism came under extreme scrutiny June 14th and 15th on the Compton Community College campus. Shout out to community colleges. Up to 1,000 enthusiastic brothers and sisters gathered there for a counter-racism conference, a 4-workshop series to promote new thinking towards counter-racism, which revealed the nuts and bolts of white supremacy, its history, and its impact. Sponsored by SO1 Books, it was also, of course, an impressive book sale. The workshop, more like lectures, were held in the school's gymnasium and began Friday night with the profound and ever-popular Francis Cress Welsing from Washington, D.C. But the bulk of the innovative program unfolded Saturday beginning at noon with Chicago poet, author, and publisher Haki Madhubuti, and continuing through midday with D.C. counter-racist theorist Neely Fuller Jr. That evening, ostracized New York State Supreme Court Judge Bruce Wright, a.k.a. Turn 'em Loose Bruce Cowbell, capped off an intense and inspiring program. Each of the speakers has authored a book that offers a perspective on white supremacy racism and how it affects non-whites, particularly blacks. Although well known in the national black community for her views on the practice of black psychiatry and the subjects of the white supremacy system and of melanin, Dr. Welsing did not produce her first book on these matters until a year ago. Now the top seller on the Black Bookstore charts, The ISIS Papers, is a specialized study of white supremacy's origins, focusing on its psychological motivations, its psychological dynamics, and its psychological impact on its victims, non-white people. Having been in demand as a speaker throughout the 80s, Welsing has gotten better at it as the 90s pace gets underway. She presents her case so well that it's almost like watching a scholarly performance with humor, pathos, logic, and a chalkboard simplification of racism's relentless interference with everyone's lives. Racism is the most evil dynamic in the world today. She emphasizes we are required by cosmic law to change this dynamic. Those who've heard Welsing and read ISIS know that she views racism historically as the whites' response to black genetic dominance. She says the gun is both a tool and a symbol devised to counter the threat of the black male genitals, the annihilator of recessive white genetics. This, she says, is the true of South African apartheid and any other system on earth which limits the rights and activities of non-white people. Now I'm skipping down to the part where it gets to Mr. Fuller. Neely Fuller is recognized as the originator of contemporary counter-racism philosophy and analysis of the white supremacy system. His self-published book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, has been called the Bible of counter-race behavior. Fuller defines the white supremacy system, racism, as one operating simultaneously in all 9 major areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. In this context, he says the word compensatory means making up for what's missing. In the case of racism, what's missing is the truth. His laws of counter-racism include: 1. Everything about race, racism, and counter-racism should be questioned. 2. In discussion, if you don't understand race, all else will confuse you. 3. The concept and term race are racist. Racism is practiced by whites mistreating non-whites. 4. No major problems can be eliminated without first eliminating racism. 5. Fear of white supremacy retards opposing activity, for sure. There are other Fuller laws, some on racism, some on counter-racists' approach to it. All basically intend to comprise a code of thought, speech, and action to be employed in avoiding or otherwise eliminating racism and advancing justice and correctness in the society. All black people and non-whites in general, according to Fuller, are victims of racism, VOR. Their status as victims of racism gives them individual right to talk about and or eliminate white supremacy. This right he calls the Victim's Guaranteed Qualification, the VGQ. He stresses that blacks should maximize their time and energy in exercising their specific right. As a side light, I cracked up on this one. As a side light, Fuller's question and answer period was marred by a conflict over definitions of culture. Neither Fuller nor his questioner could agree on one definition, because his definition remained in the context of the pervasive system of white supremacy. Many in the audience were incensed when Fuller said, "You have no culture." It certainly is something to think about in view that many divisive elements at work within the black culture. Now, I cracked up laughing. I mean, woo! When I read that, it's not like I haven't heard that before where black people have waked up like, "What did you say, Fuller?" But, oh man, I would love to see this. Now, if Fuller went out there to California and told these black people, whole room, 1,000 black people, he went out there in Compton, no less, and told them, "You ain't got no culture." And they got, "What did you say?" "I got culture. It's black issue. And don't you come out and who did you get that?" And then he said, okay. Black culture. I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. That's black. Look. I thought about, after I read this and stopped rolling on the floor laughing, I said, man, one, I would love to see this. If anybody like video, it would be great if they got the audio, but Jesus Christ, can they get video of this? Just the Q&A part of it would be fine. June 14, 15, the Compton Community College campus, the Counter Racism Conference. I'll make sure I give the full name, but the Compton Community College Conference, Counter Racism Conference. Yeah, that's what it's called. The 4-workshop series from 1991 in June. If someone can find this, oh my God. You talk about crack up and roll out on the floor. But anyway, I said, man, Fuller, and even I had to pause because I said, dang, is this in Compton? I just played the archive that I got. Dr. Welsing, she was in Compton in 1983. I just played a snippet of that on the program. She was talking about the Mercedes and all the rest of it. And I said, when I saw that she was in Compton, and I started cracking up laughing then too because I couldn't get it out of my head. I said, for whatever reason, I keep seeing Eazy-E drive up to the facility and get out and filth, and get out of my town. I run Compton. And he throws empty can of malt liquor on the ground and drives off into the night. And I keep seeing Dr. Welsing, and she comes out, she says, see, black self-respect annihilated. See that? Throwing trash down where black people work and live. See that? See that? Cursing it. See? 10 stops, sitting there doing all that profanity, foul mouth. See? I kept visualizing that, right? Lo and behold, they go back to Compton, and there it is. Now, I said, what, Fuller? I would have loved it if Fuller, all the folks in there get hot. Fuller, you ain't gonna need no flight because I'm gonna beat you behind back to D.C. and don't you never bring yourself around here. Who you think you is? Tell me you ain't got no black culture. No. Say, okay, brother. Okay, fellas. Okay, let's see. How about this? I'm gonna start. You all fill in the blank. Rolling down the street, smoking Indo, sipping all 1,000 of them on gin and juice, laid back. Now that's black culture. Damn it, I didn't say replace white supremacy with, and had a whole room sitting there, crickets. Replace white, back to that black culture thing, Fuller. Don't be getting no quiz. Don't you come out here talking about we ain't got no, I will smack with the, that there is black culture. Do not be mistaken. Do not be confused. No way, shape, form. Embarrassing, but and even 2025, that would still count and be black culture. Mad about it. I don't even know what he said. We don't have a culture and all that. Now, what did they say other than yes, we do? Fried chicken. Snoop Dogg, hip-hop music, Dr. Dre, which is the same thing we would say now. Kendrick Lamar, you about to be at the Super Bowl. Same thing we would say now. Cornrows. Robust gratitude, Fuller. Man. He went out there and dealt with them crazy Angelinos for a whole weekend, and they ready to riot and kill him. Speaking of riot, when I went back and looked at the news reports for this time period, and I just told you the report I just read, that's June 27, 1991, which would be, 3 months after the beating of Rodney King. Neely Fuller Jr. was in Los Angeles, not Compton. He was in Los Angeles April 3, 1992, so not quite a year later. Next calendar year, he came back, was in L.A., and did a talk weeks before the Rodney King riots. Now, that gave me pause for a lot of reasons. One, if he went out and did the same thing then, they already mad. They're looking at what's happening out in Simi Valley. It's looking like it's not going to go right. Like, don't you come out here and we already getting wound up to go do some damage. Don't you come out here talking fool talk now. That's one. Two, how many people have the experience of going to Los Angeles man, we got to get the hell out of town because they fitting to ride because the Dodgers won the World Series. They didn't beat up Rodney King. Kobe Bryant won the World Series. We got Luka Doncic. They got a reason every other day. We got the fires. We got a reason every other day to riot. How many people, that's their LA experience. And how many other cities? Ooh, we barely made it out by the skin of my teeth. They was about to riot, you know. They didn't win the Super Bowl, or they didn't go to the Super Bowl, or they fired the coach, or Snoop's album didn't come out. Come on, man. Come on. To live and die in LA, indeed. And Fuller was there in April 1992, literally days before the LA riots. He was also there February 1995. Now, it took me looking at the date on the calendar a little bit longer for 92 to, oh, wow, he was there right before the riots. Like, Jesus Christ, I'm glad it wasn't later in the month. That could have been dicey. That February 95, pow, immediately, oh, my God. You are in Los Angeles, February of 1995. Orinthal James Simpson. Everything would have been on hold. Can I get a seat at the trial? Like, are we going to have to wait outside? Like, what do we need to do? Can I get somebody to hold my place in line or what? But that for sure would have been one like, Jesus, you were in LA during the trial. Did you go to the trial? Did you try to go and hang out? Did you go and ride by the courtroom just to see if they were riding or doing anything crazy? Like, wow. Anyway, those are two wacky ones that I found. I'm sure Mr. Fuller did a lot of other. He was in D.C. for 9/11, so I mean, that would be a little bit more significant than being in L.A. during the time of the O.J. Simpson trial or just before the Rodney King riots in April 1992. But Fuller did make a mark in L.A. repeatedly, and man, if somebody can get that video of him going out there and them having a tiff that was so bad they had to include it in the newspaper report over black culture. Woo! Thank you, Mr. Fuller. He was so patient in dealing with us, even the Bloods and the Crips out in Southern California. We are super grateful, Mr. Fuller. We're going to get it. One of these days, it's going to click. Black culture is some rubbish, and we're going to let it go. Anyway, let's see. The reports that we heard from today, let's see, we started off, they talked about the far-right so-called, that's in the word guide, far-right in Germany, party, and all of the ground that they've made exactly what Dr. Welsing said, all these non-white people coming up in here, and we got to do something about it. Too many non-white people, too many dark people, and we got to get rolling. Exactly the type of thing I said. Dr. Welsing, go back to study Germany again and what it looks like right now. How similar is this to when you went before? Wow. Global system indeed. Certainly the situation in the Congo continues. I just mentioned when we were reading Dr. Maya Angelou's autobiography on Thursday, and she mentioned the mining conflict and Belgian whites going in to control the resources. Same thing today. And again, all of that I view as an Apple event. They for sure would be vested. Steve Jobs looking on from down low or up high, however you think about it, but for sure vested. We got our next round of iPhones and everything. We got to be real vested about what's happening in the mines in the Congo, DRC. Let's see. The Grenfell Tower, we talked about that. We had black people from the UK on. Esther Stanford Kosei was with us 2017. Right? Like, it even gave me pause, like, whoa. It has been 8 years since that happened, 2017, but she was with us to talk about all of that, and it was a lot of non-white people who were impacted by that. I was a little, I guess, confused because I wasn't really sure. They said like the victims and the people who lived there, and it wasn't all non-white people, of course, but it was a lot of non-white people. I said the people who were victims, what did they want exactly? Like, because I know in a lot of situations where they have like a tragedy and a loss of life or loss of a large number of lives, frequently they will tear down that structure, like Sandy Hook, and I think even the shooting that happened down in Florida. I think that school, I don't know if that school has been destroyed yet, but it has not been utilized. I think it was a crime scene and they needed it for the court case. Parkland, that's it. They needed it for the court case for some time, but they didn't just go back to using that structure. So I'm not sure if they want to keep the tower there for Grenfell and make it a memorial, or I'm not clear on what they want to do with it. But I do know that it is pretty common, even if it's a lot of white people, if there's some sort of mass tragedy event, they generally, or not all the time because they didn't tear Columbine down, but frequently they will go ahead and raise the structure, just not to have a relic of death there. But I would, if they put a memorial there, something like that, where people can come and reflect, I think that would be good. All truth about what happened and why this fire took place, the loss of life, all of that. But just, what would they like? What are the options in terms of what they can have in place? The Archdiocese sex scandal in New Orleans. Now, they said the Pelicans, Zion Williams, right? The Pelicans and the Saints helped the local New Orleans Archdiocese with the language and the words that they wanted to use so it wouldn't be so repugnant. And that was even the second part of it, because the first part of it was them potentially using funds that people had contributed for different programs, and we want to help do something about the homeless population in New Orleans. Maybe they got a few Katrina stragglers left over, make sure we don't have any more Negro looters. They took that money, say we got all these, court cases and money that we got to pay compensation from all these child rape cases in the Archdiocese. Let's take some of that money, we can pay out our debts and things. Like, what? Do what? Even just that, y'all done raped so many folks that you got debts piled up to the ceiling and got that all over the world. Churches declaring bankruptcy and what, because they done allowed all these child rapes to go on with impunity for a century, some of them even longer than that, depending on how old the church is. And then, on top of all that, you don't get ostracized in town. The Saints and Pelicans, they come and put their arms around you, and we believe in what y'all are doing. And we want to help you with your messaging and wording, and maybe even go and talk to some of these folks in the press and get them to back up off of y'all and go a little bit easy on. Like, do what? Did Fuller have that sort of relationship? Did the Washington Redskins and the Washington Wizards, these are sports teams in the Washington, D.C. area, did they reach out to him and, you've been a government citizen, you worked at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and Korean War veteran? I mean, hey, salt of the earth, Fuller, we want to help you out. Let's help you with your messaging and your wording and how you promote your literature and counter racist activities. Like, did that happen? If it didn't, why are the Saints reaching out? These are child rapists. Why is that? Well, we vested, and we believe in second chances. We got a PR department. We normally try to get them season ticket holders and people come on in here and see Zion Williamson if he's playing. But, we can devote a little bit and help out. And yeah, we'll see. Matter of fact, we'll even talk to the journalists. Even that, see if we can help with the coverage and how they focus on all this. What? I know the Saints are not in the Super Bowl tomorrow, the Pelicans, whatever. But, man, that I would have to think about that one. Like, gee, we put money in the church and y'all going to give it to fix the child raping scandal as opposed to feeding people? It's starving folks from Katrina still having a tough time down there. Starving black people, looters potentially, from Katrina still having a tough time. We can't get them a po' boy? Come on, and that's another one. When I heard that, I said, okay, now, I started saying in 2012, right after Sandy Hook and Jimmy Savile and all that, my phrase, I was nervous and timid about saying it then, not now. My phrase, not all white people are racist. Wait a minute, that is my phrase now, but that's not what I meant to say. Wait a minute. What I meant, let me get my mind right. I meant to say, white people do not care about children. And there it is again. We could have just studied the Catholic Church and I'd have got to that real quick, but I'm not Catholic. And that would be another one. Now, why is white supremacy the strongest religion in the world, known universe? Well, the Catholics, it can't be that one because they're raping children. So you can't be practicing and a good Catholic if you're out raping children or helping them cover all that up, right? That should be unanimous, right? Let's see. The lung cancer. Now, I was staggered by that report. I don't smoke. You should not smoke cigarettes. We talked about that before and done whole programs about how race soldiers have deliberately targeted areas where they warehouse black people, allow us to stay, and we make sure we get all the cool cigarettes and Newport cigarettes. Matter of fact, remember all those reports where they talked about how the flavor, they were talking about menthol cigarettes. That was the one flavor. And they blamed that on Al Sharpton. Remember? They had folks like Al Sharpton, powerful white people saying, man, you children, I would love to do something about these menthol cigarettes, but that rascal Al Sharpton, oh, Lord, can anybody do something about Al Sharpton? Then we can take care of the cigarette problem. But the cigarettes been an issue before Al Sharpton was born, dumping cigarettes on black people. But they talked about the secondhand cigarette smoke in the lung cancer problem, and then they went on to talk about air pollution. I was really staggered with that because I wasn't really aware that, oh, wow, air pollution, that's, a big reason why you got a lot of this lung cancer, not cigarette smoking per se, even though that contributes to it too. They've been saying the whole time, in California with these wildfires, like from day one, we had made progress with our smog problem, all our poisonous air. This has retarded all of that and thrown all this asbestos and lead and God knows what else into the atmosphere, and all these wildfires that are burning up houses and cars, anything where it's not just trees in the forest, that is way bad for the environment. They said we don't even know how bad this could be, how long the impact could be, who knows. That's what they've been talking about the whole time. And people with asthma, the elderly, children, people that already got respiratory issues, Negras, Newports. Oh man, who knows? They even said I might take some years off of your life after we get done with all this. That's what they've been saying in the LA Times, LA Sentinel. That's what it brought to mind immediately, like, wow. Now, even check now, it might be something where it takes 2 decades to even grasp, like, whoa, look at all the increase in lung cancer we got in Southern California after these wildfires. Yep, could be. Not just LA, Southern California increase in lung cancer. Could be. Cesspoolians toxify the whole planet. Let's see. And then the vaping. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing left us in 2016. She was so ahead of her time. That was her in 2013 saying, you don't know what's in it. You don't know what's in it. I remember when we had non-white people who said, Dr. Welsing doesn't know what she's talking about. You can grow your own cannabis. Now, how many people, even after you got about half of the states in the U.S. with legal, how many black people do you know they exclusively grow their own ganja before they get to do the puff puff pass? How many? I only smoke what I grow. You got to be joking. And as they said in the report, people don't even do that anymore. Now I vape. It's vape and pass. Vape and pass. What's in that? Who knows? You got a lab? Who knows? What other adulterates? Can you pronounce all that? Nope. But it sure is good. And the concentration, they talked about all of that. Who studied now? Out of all those people who were with us there and said Dr. Welsing doesn't know what she's talking about, which might be true, how many of you all got any sort of scientific knowledge? Dr. Welsing, medical doctor, I bet she did take a biology class somewhere along the way. How many of you all got some sort of chemistry expertise, biology expertise, went to a lab to see how they make all these concoctions? How many? I'm going to take a guess and say 0. Sobriety would be best, and that's all the cookie and other crazy things. They're not even doing flour anymore. That's like 1970s Cheech and Chong, man. Like, catch up. Let's see. That segment on the EPA Justice Department, Justice Office as they labeled it, disgusted me in a number of reasons. They had a victim of white supremacy, Mustafa Ali, as a guest on the program. VGQ, he can say whatever he wants. But when he got towards the middle of the conversation, which wasn't that long, and he said that, well, first, I'm very concerned about the deregulation and the focus on corporate profits, because anytime that we place profit over people, then we are putting a crosshair on the most vulnerable, our most marginalized. You mean non-white people? He says, for all those brothers and sisters who are still there at the end, even that, that's why, don't call me brother and sister. If that term is just going to be moved, and now it's, all of my coworkers are now brothers and sisters, and everybody in the struggle, my white brothers, cool in the gang, don't call me brother. All the brothers and sisters who still work at the EPA, I would give them the words of my grandmother, that you have power unless you give it away. I don't know what that means. And that means that not only them, but citizens across our country who believe that everyone has the right to have clean air and clean water for their children to be able to be on land that is free from toxic pollution, that we have to raise our voices. Metaphor, we have to get engaged. We have to make sure that folks understand that this is not an American value, and that we also have to understand that there is power inside our vote. I'm nauseous. You mean like the vote where President Trump just won? That's what you mean? I never tell anyone who to vote for, but I do say you should be thinking very clearly about voting for somebody who cares about your community. So don't give up your power. Continue to build relationships together and stand in solidarity. So much of that is worthless rhetoric. I mean, it's 2025. Just coming out and saying, build relationships together, build solidarity, build unity, come together. Like, are you serious? You should not be allowed to stand in front of a microphone if that's going to be your response to racism. Any shape, form of come together, stand in solidarity, build a relate. Like, shut up. Just shut up. You have nothing to say constructive. Just be quiet. Certainly VGQ, but I mean, wow, it's 2025 and that's all we got to say about poisoned air and water. And even I had to rewind because it was at the very beginning when they started that segment with Mr. Ali, who is a victim of white supremacy, Victims Guaranteed Qualified. When they went to talking about, oh no, social justice and who gets clean air and clean water, he went to Appalachia. White people in Appalachia. Again, now if we're going to be cowardly about white supremacy, racism, we'll just be subject to white people for another 3,000 years and, oh well, till we get the courage to deal with this problem. They have reports that are old and moldy. It is not white people in Appalachia where they go looking to dump toxic waste. It is where are the dark people. That's why they got old and moldy reports say, once you see the concentration of niggers, and I don't even think it was black and brown people. It wasn't dark people, it was niggers. Not that they don't dump toxic waste on other non-white people, but it was real stark. Once you see that concentration of dark people growing up, oh yeah, we are fitting to put the whammy toxic poison on y'all. Not no toothless white people in Appalachia. And Love Canal, because we talked about that one a lot. When white people get poisoned, they have the means to fight back so they can get taken care of. Love Canal. We talked about that, and that's in A Terrible Thing to Waste. Harriet A. Washington, top 10 book list 2 times. Let's see. Oh, the mass shooting. I get that one in. And one more. The mass shooting and then the suspect in Maine. But the mass shooting in Sweden, that was a white fella. If I can say his name, Rickard, I think is how you say it. R-I-C-K-A-R-D, Rickard, right? Anderson, 35-year-old, who allegedly died at the shooting. Now, the audio report that we heard, they said they didn't think this was any sort of ideological killing, and he didn't go out to do this, even though this is a place, education center where immigrants use this to try to get a job, get a foothold in Sweden. Lots of resources, so-called homogenous society. They don't have a lot of dark people in Sweden. The report on independent.co.uk is titled Sweden Shooting Victim Bassam al-Shaleh posted a video wishing all a good day. This report is just a couple days ago. Midway through the article, it reads, Rickard Anderson, the 35-year-old suspect named by Swedish media, and a police source has been described as a recluse who had little contact with the outside world. Swedish police have yet to share a motive for the killings, but confirmed to the Independent on Thursday that they are not ruling out the possibility of a racist motivation behind the attack. They go on to show what the shooter looks like. White dude for sure, pale blue eyes and all of that. Now, I haven't seen a listing of what all of the shooters look, or excuse me, the victims. Sorry, I haven't seen a listing of what all of the victims from this attack look like. So, at least from some of the people who were shot, it looks like some of these people look like they would be classified as white, but I'm not sure. That is for sure one to keep, or just pay attention to and see if they conclude, yeah, this was something similar. The attack, Christchurch in New Zealand, or tops with Peyton Gendron, that I am upset. We are having too many non-white people, just like in Germany, coming in here. I am upset about this, and I'm going to go Oslo, Anders Breivik. I'm upset because they kept saying the Nordic, Sweden, Norway, these are those Nordic super white wealthy areas, right? Have to pay attention to see if that, it turns out that, yeah, that is what this was, racist attack. The last one, it was one of our listeners. She had picked out the report about the main suspect who had the standoff with enforcement officials, where he said he had a problem with abortion and gay rights. This is a white man. He gets and he shot the dog preacher. What in the one? And I mean, he's supposed to be like under the graveyard. Like, you shoot you shoot a dog, police dog. Like, oh man, they're supposed to unload every clip on you for real. They're gonna have like elaborate funeral, preacher too. Like, oh my God, they're gonna cut it. Man, they're gonna cut a fool up in Maine this week. But she showed that, like, where this dude is all hunkered in and got all of his, firearms and everything else. I didn't even see what like precipitated this. What set him off. They had his white wife on the report, and she said, "Oh no, this isn't him. This is him." That white dude put a live stream out and everything. He had his firearm out, posting, talking about, in a standoff with the police. They came here, and now we're in a shootout. I got the dog. I laid him out. I'm not playing. It's Saturday night, and I'm dangerous. Like, man, what does it mean to be white? I would even put that in with end-stage white supremacy, where we will probably see more incidents just like that. Even both of them, the school shooting in Sweden and with what happened in Maine, where you have white people who might even be unprovoked. Just whatever. I seen too many dark people today, or I'm disgruntled with my status as a white man. I think I should be more powerful or doing better, and got to go work around all these dark people living around me, and I'm upset, and I got to go do some shooting. Got to go do some killing. Might even go kill some white people. Kill the police dog, I would be mindful. I would be alert about being out in public spaces and such. They got the Super Bowl tomorrow. All of that they've been talking about. Oh, man. Prices for the big game drop because we just had that attack in New Orleans before the college football championship, and people seem like they're okay. And I would be real mindful about being out in public space. I'd be real mindful about white people out in public, period. If you're at the grocery store or wherever else, movie theater, just, man, being classified as white and the end-stage white supremacy, end-stage white supremacy mindset of violence and chaos, and the drug component too. Be on alert when you are out, and especially even Black History Month, because a lot of times that too will have folks be provoked and such. That was the shooting in 2023 at the Covenant School, was during Black History Month. Be alert. Be aware, be sober. I said that too. If they're out for the Super Bowl parties and all of that, be sober. Christopher Dorner did his attack on Super Bowl weekend way back in 2013. Sobriety would be best. Then you could be alert and aware of what's happening around you. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943#. pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We'll see if folks have their favorite saying as we go. Folks have thoughts, observations from this week. Folks have like their favorite saying. When I say saying, the obvious one, still learning, or follow the logic. I feel like he said those all the time. All the time. But if you have your favorite Fuller saying, we can share those as we go. Other thoughts and observations. I know one that I will get in that I don't hear repeated as often. Resist the urge to criticize other victims of racism. I didn't hear him say that one as often, but wow, I thought that was so important. And he had so many other no shadow boxing and all the rest of it that he talked about. But man, resist the urge to criticize other victims of racism. That is one I super duper appreciate. Is so many white people that are worthy of criticism, worthy of, investigate every single word that they said. Is it truthful? Did they lie to us and all the rest of it? But man, non-white people, you don't have to agree with them. Resist the urge. That's why victims guaranteed qualified, which I already said today a few times, I think. Resist the urge to criticize. Any hoodles, let's see. Folks have thoughts, observations to share. Star 61, this week's reports and such. Let's see if folks are, I don't know if they're spectating or not. I will take the time to beg. Let's see. Now, if we can find, it would have been, I guess, better if I had known or had the inkling, man, I should see if I can find some of these old Fuller articles and such while I was down in California. But, oh well, you work with things as you find them. If anybody can locate when Fuller ventured to California, or I guess it would be maybe cool if we get the whole 4-day workshop series. That would be cool as well. But at minimum, the Fuller portion of this, so we can get the Q&A from June, I guess he was there on the 15th, but the whole workshop was June 14 and 15, 1991, California, Compton specifically, Compton Community College. I have no idea who would have been in charge of such an event. If the community college would have like a record of this at the library maybe, or if citizen, like I said, somebody might have a cassette tape of this in their shoebox in the attic, or a videotape, VHS. I have no idea. But man, if anybody can work on, I'll work on it myself. If they can work on, we can work on acquiring the 1991 Counter-Racism Conference from Compton, June 14-15. Love it. Just like I said, even if it's just the Q&A part of it, where we can nab what went down over black culture. What did they say? Like, what now? How long did this take? Like, is this one of those where it hopped off, it derailed the whole, conversation and whatever else they were supposed to be focused on and talking about, because people got so riled up about black culture, which, again, I have seen that not once or twice, but a few times where we get, riled up about that black culture thing. Even 21st century riled up about that black culture thing, because this is like 25 years ago, or 35, excuse me, at this juncture, 35 years ago, and we still haven't made too much progress on black culture. I told you that from this week, the talk that I heard here in Seattle, where they said black culture was fried chicken, afros, and they were serious. So, hey, more work to be done, obviously. We will be here, as I said, tomorrow. More work, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, live time with the Super Bowl. Folks who are excited, riled up about the game, have to watch, especially if you have younger children. I try not to let them watch the game if you can, if they already have got that as a behavior pattern where gotta be in, and I know all these people, and I've been rooting for Pat Mahomes the whole season and all the rest of it. So I said, hey, don't have TV if you're going to have to. But, yeah, too late. I would say try to break that habit, not be in that habit. Obviously, it doesn't work as well if you are watching the game or at the Super Bowl party or whatever else the case may be. But try to see if you can do something else constructive. I know being out here on the West Coast, the game starts a little earlier in the day, like the sun is still up and what have you. So see if you can go outside, perish the thought, go do some hiking or whatever else. You go, if you have an indoor pool, do something, get some exercise where you're not even around the television screen at all. Maybe even we can forget that there is a tackle football game on. Anywho, like I said, if you got folks who they are addicted and they've been watching this already, maybe y'all can get out early in the day and get some exercise in, so it's not just a whole day vegging in front of the TV, watching nonsense and drinking alcoholic beverages and cursing at the screen. If you're going to be doing food around all of this, eat better food. Heard all that about the ultra-processed foods and the liquor and all the rest of it. Get some veggies. You don't have to do chicken wings. You could do, they have so many alternatives with tofu and everything else, but you could eat much healthier. You could do veggie pizza. That's one of my all-time favorites. We had that at the yoga retreat. Lots of better options than just sitting around and eating a whole lot of lard and grease and pork and bacon and all that. And the sodas, I forgot about that. The sodas, we talked about that last week. All that sugar and the food coloring. Like, it's so many bad decisions that are associated with, everything connected with tackle football and the Super Bowl. We could make much better decisions with our time and energy. That, again, while we're on tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, talking about racism and tackle football so people can make better choices, not having to veg out in front of the game, thinking about the problem on the planet, and, like I said, how we use our time and energy. I should know by tomorrow, have it confirmed if we'll be here for Monday as well to discuss the wildfires, which I think is super important for lots of reasons, even beyond California. But certainly we have a number of listeners in the California area. But man, all of those climate disaster type scenarios, hurricanes or floods or wildfires, all of that. I mean, that, especially if you have offspring, that is a part of the counter-racist code in terms of dealing with all of that. Just right. That's why we're having the program, I hope, coming up this Monday. Man, it's so many things to think about, even if your specific residence survives. Let's say, hopefully if it doesn't burn down, or if it's a flood, if it doesn't impact your residence. Just things as simple as, and I remember this from Katrina, do you get access to your neighborhood? Maybe. Maybe not. They had lots of folks in Los Angeles dealing with that right now. Got the National Guard because they said looters, of course. Do you get to go in, access your property, see if everything is okay, survey the damage and all that? Or do they have folks that you got to wait a little while, it's not safe yet, or which it may not be. But that did happen in Hurricane Katrina as well, where a lot of non-white people, very difficult even getting access to go back to your property and see if anything is left over and what are we working with and all. I mean, there's so many things to process and think about with regards to those disasters that that should be something. Pay attention. What are those folks talking about? Insurance questions, all of that. Did they evacuate? Some of the people evacuated and that worked out okay. Some of the people stayed, that worked out okay. Lots of that. And then not even get to the school for your children, job. Is the air safe? Is the soil safe? Is the water safe? Like all the rest just goes on and on and on. So much to think about. If you live in California, you should certainly be studying all of this and the counter-racism components of this. And then if you live beyond, hopefully not, I won't say knock on wood, but hopefully this sort of thing won't be in your region anytime soon. But man, with the climate disasters and climate events that have been taking place all over the world, I wouldn't be oblivious. I would not want to be caught where I've never thought about this before, and we don't really have a plan together about, evacuating, escaping. We don't have important documents stashed away, that sort of thing. We haven't looked at our insurance policy. I wouldn't exactly want to be in that position. I don't know where you live, but, you know. Any hoodles. We'll see if folks are satisfied if they're, you know, all spectating, gearing up. Got to get those hors d'oeuvres and chips and everything straight for the big shindig tomorrow. If they're getting set for the game, have other things going on, but we'll give folks maybe 5 minutes, see if they have commentary to share. We will wrap up and get ready for tomorrow's broadcast. Not for spectators, but tomorrow, Monday, should be on. And then wrapping up Dr. Maya Angelou's autobiography on Thursday, which has been, I don't even know how to say it. It's been, man, just such a alert. Like, I didn't know, number one, I didn't know that she had so many other autobiographies, right? Because we read one of her books, but man, like, that she had contact with Dr. Martin Luther King, contact with Minister Malcolm X, Billie Holiday, Abby Lincoln. Like, it's just, wow. Like, I knew she was not some worthless nobody, right? Doctor and poet and all this, and spoke it, or not spoke, but did her poem at Bill Clinton's inauguration way back when and everything. But just wow, like, what an amazing time period she's covered in the book, and also, in my view, reveals quite a bit about the system of white supremacy, the lack of codification during that time period in terms of not having definitions and not being precise with word choice. Even black culture on display throughout in the text. Exactly why Fuller would tell an audience in Los Angeles about 30 years later that you don't have a culture. Talking about people classified as black, you don't have a culture. Raggedy and lame, that's about it. Response to racism, that's about as best as you can call it. On display in the book as well. But man, it has been a hoot, and we should be wrapping the whole thing up on Thursday, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, with Dr. Maya Angelou. And I'd asked, are people aware, especially black females, because I said, you know, it would be assumed black dudes don't read, especially not, you know, Dr. Maya Angelou's autobiography that I didn't even know about, so I'm in that boat too. But black females, did you all know of this book? Heard this book before? Own this book? Even if you own it, I'm not even saying if you read it, but just, have you seen this book, The Heart of a Woman? Because I had never seen it, I'd never heard it, I'd never seen the titles, like, none of the above. Like, it was all strange to me. We're about to wrap it up now, but I would suspect that for many other black people, even many black females, this would probably be true, because I don't think they even read this book in schools like that. I know they read, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, but I've never seen anybody, this book falling out of their backpack or complaining that they had to write a paper on this book or take a quiz, you know, on this book and what they were talking about. Never. If that is the case, if we got any folks out there where you did study all this for school, let us know. Even share, like, what grade was this? Was this college? Was this high school? Like, what do you remember, you know, about all of this? Be news flash to me. Anyway, but we're wrapping all that up on Thursday. Let's see. Anything else I want to make sure we get in before, if nobody has any commentary, what have you, to share? One, I'd say again, just make sure that you share. We did our program on Wednesday discussing Mr. Fuller, but if you have other non-white people say that they want to learn about white supremacy, racism, they still use terms like white privilege, discrimination, that sort of thing, hook them up. If you tried before, maybe you can try again. You know, you don't want to be discourteous and force it on them, but man, he did all of that work. And even you can switch it up. Programs, right? If they are not a literate person, meaning they just, at this point, aren't excited about going to get a new book, he certainly left lots of podcasts and videos and all the rest. So you could try that way and see if they maybe get engaged. But try your best. Share the information. We, non-white people, victims of racism, need to be on our assignment to get this here problem solved. Mr. Fuller certainly used the time and energy that he had to offer up as much help and assistance as he could. And I mean, wow, he left us so much material. Use it. Same thing we said when Dr. Welsing passed. All the material that she left, Use it to hurry up and get this here problem solved immediately. That's it. I would assume everybody satisfied or didn't have any commentary, observations to share. We'll be here on Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then, like I said, I will know by tomorrow, theoretically, whether or not the California program on Monday, just being able to go over some of the many different ways that black people specifically have been impacted by the fires, the school component of it, all of that. I'll be able to know Monday evening. I'll have that info tomorrow. Might be the next 2 days that we're on, and then normal schedule with Thursday, Friday for the coming up week. If you get confused, lost along the way, feel free to drop a line. Social media, I'll have updates for upcoming programs and all that good stuff for tomorrow and the beginning of the week. Regular email, untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. That's it. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. We do not need take the whole day tomorrow, drinking, vaping, all the rest of it. Preserve the brain computer. They even have studies. I've heard this for years. I don't know if this is just cliche or white people lying or whatever, but I've heard them say for years, like places where they do manufacturing and things like making cars and whatever else, the Monday after the Super Bowl, you do not want anything that they have manufactured. Like they just assume, regardless of who wins, if your team wins or lose, whatever the case may be, that you'll have all these folks who are hungover and all the rest of it, that, man, it's going to be missing bolts and screws and everything else. That right there. Sobriety would be best. We are already in a pitiful position. And I say for non-white people, I don't even know if you would get that sort of luxury on a job to come in, what is that, Monday the 10th, on February 10th, and be slack and doing, half put together work and forgetting screws or what have you, and end up being fired. I was at the Pat Mahomes Super Bowl party and stayed out too late and had too many beers and had a terrible Monday and then lost my job. Come on now. Come on. Or end up being late getting to work. That's when they get you too, see. Let's be sober so we can start the week off great without any problems and no brain damage from the bowl. To keep your children away from the game tomorrow, if anything, and remind folks, if they are going out, or even if it's you going out to partay, Super Bowl shindig and whatnot, man, they will probably have sobriety checkpoints. See if you can get someplace, stay there, have the party at your house so you're already at home, and or be sober. Call an Uber, right? You got so many different ways. No reason you got to leave the Super Bowl party intoxicated and run that risk bumping into a race soldier getting home. Sobriety would be best, and you do not want to be around intoxicated white people at no Super Bowl party. Mess everything up real quick. Or even non-white people. A lot of us can be super non-constructive if we're intoxicated too. So same thing I said, be alert. If it looks like people are getting rowdy and upset and might have lost some money about what happened tomorrow, well, have to cut this one short. We'll see everybody next year, next time around. Be safe, drive safely. We'll talk tomorrow. Sobriety would be best. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling. Black people, I said just 30 days. Just 30 days, right? I didn't say the rest of the year. I didn't say we had to go till summertime. Just 30 days. No name calling black people. Shouldn't be that difficult. Make it to March 5. No name. And, hey, Fuller says no name calling. Now, if you really got to do some name calling, you could name call race soldiers for the next 29 days or so. Fuller says no name calling, but I mean, hey, it's been my experience. We only name call black people. So if you really, really, really got to call somebody out of their name for the next 30 days, maybe a racist, maybe. Or you could just do it cold turkey, no name calling, period. Either or. No gossiping. No throwaway offspring. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.